What is the secret you discovered that made you leave your ex? She went out with her friends one night. I had a headache and didn't feel like going anywhere, so I stayed in. She had messed up before, so we did the whole location sharing thing. This woman still goes to this guy's house and doesn't come home till 5 a.m. Truth was, I didn't have a headache. I had a feeling she was talking to him again, so I let it happen. It happened on a Friday night, and Saturday night we had a dinner planned with her parents who were in town. I figured I'd suffer through it, work on finding a new place to live immediately, and the next week just disappear. Saturday night at dinner, her mom says, "Let me know when you want to propose and I'll give you my ring." My ex nudges me and says, "Yeah, when are you going to ask, huh?" I laughed so hard during the interaction, knowing she was with someone else less than 24 hours earlier. Sunday morning, she starts going in on me about the dishes as I'm doing them. I finally got so fed up, I just laughed and said, "So, where were you Friday night?" She turned white. "Oh man, I know he wanted to power through, but he should have asked that question when the ring was brought up in front of her parents. Am I not right? Right? Yikes." Story 2. I had a friend whose wife left him after 3 years of marriage for some dude she met on World of Warcraft but never met in IRL. She literally packed her bags and moved across the country to be with this new guy. My friend was pretty devastated for obvious reasons, but to add some stank to the whole thing, aside from me and my brother and 2 of our other friends who were also brothers, he had no one else in his life. The dude was basically an orphan for as long as I knew, and we met as children, and when he got married, he finally got a new family. His wife had 3 sisters and a single mom who all accepted my buddy as a new brother. Anyway, the old girl moves across the country without a single care for her husband, but her mom and sisters feel terrible about everything and keep hanging out with my friend. He spent so much time with his ex's mom that they ended up together. LOL. And his ex, she was 100% catfished by the guy she left her husband for. The irony is that everyone knew she was being catfished. It was so obvious. Rich business owners who live in big beach houses don't pick up 20-something married women through online role-playing games. The guy was at least 15 years older than he said, didn't own his own auto parts business, he was an assistant store manager for a chain, and his quote-unquote house on the beach was 2 miles from said beach and owned by his mother, who he still lived with. And as if all of this couldn't get more crazy, she pretty much gaslit herself. She refuses to see the truth. She's convinced herself that she always knew the truth and is happy with this guy. Some people just cannot admit they were wrong. My friend is still with his ex's mom, by the way. They actually make a cute couple and are a lot of fun to hang around with. LOL. It's a little trashy sounding, no doubt about it, but getting to know them, it's pretty obvious the right people got together on this one. Story 3. The coworker he was worried I was attracted to? Yeah, I was. The difference is I never talked to him outside of work-related things and shut him down immediately when he showed interest in me. A girl coworker gave my ex 1 ounce of attention and he cheated and left me for her almost immediately. Later, he regretted it and said the grass isn't always greener, but now he's with her because I wouldn't move back with him and he didn't want to be lonely. I'm glad I stayed on my side of the lawn. I would never want to be the one responsible for how awful another person feels because I couldn't stay faithful at work. A partner should never have to feel insecure about you going to your job. Story 4. Her and I had been high school best friends and dated for a little bit before she broke up with me after we graduated. We remained friends, had conversations to reconcile, and continued to be in contact with each other for over 18 years. We had a silly pact where we would marry each other if we were over 35 and single. Well, we were both single, done with dating, obviously had chemistry, and decided to say, who cares, and go for it, slowly. We were all in. I didn't think anything otherwise and didn't suspect a thing. She lived about 2 hours away by plane on a direct flight, so seeing each other was easy. Well, after a few months, she had a manic episode and went missing, so I called her parents, and they hadn't heard from her in a week. They were out of town, so they were sending her sister to check on her and calling friends. I called her at work at the deli she worked at. The moment I said that this was her boyfriend, her boss said, "Well, I'm her boyfriend." Suffice to say, she'd been living a double life. He'd been giving her money for her flights to visit sick family members, me, and seeing my fading dad, that she said was her uncle, to him. I had also helped her a couple of times for flights too, so she was pocketing the money. Her family and I were in contact during the whole thing, so I told them what was happening, and she didn't like that because she got exposed as the fraud she is to her family. Story 5. His bad habits on girl streaming sites. I found out via the insane credit card bill that he could no longer hide, as the CC was through his bank and he'd maxed out his already insane credit limit, and the bank had started taking 80% of his deposited paychecks to pay it down. The CC bill was over $150,000 when I discovered it, and he could no longer pay his share of household bills due to the bank garnishing his check to pay down the balance. Seriously though, PH is free and OF wasn't a thing yet, split in 2015. How on earth do you rack up $150,000 on those sites in secret, no less? Like, where was he even watching and interacting with those sites? In the bathroom at work or something? Like, come on. We were literally together every waking minute outside of work. We were together for 9.5 years at that point. Smart man tanked his relationship and credit all in one go. Well, she got one thing right. Smart man. I mean, to be able to hide all of that $150,000 worth of debt on PH. But for real, how do you spend that much money on PH? And he's just one guy. Albeit with about $150,000 worth of girls from PH, but still, come on, that ain't real. As his own relationship with this woman, sadly. Story 6. Her secret heart, she wanted to be a traditional wife. In my 30s, I was working a good-paying union job as a welder in a shipyard, a job I truly loved. I owned a home but had no other debt, and our car was paid for. She worked as a sushi waitress a couple of times a week and earned all of our fun money, plus a little extra for her hobbies. Things were chill. We shared our car, which wasn't a big deal since our shifts never crossed, and if she ever needed the car that day, she would bring it to work in the morning at 5 a.m. and head back to do her day. A few years go by, and she expresses interest in going back to school. Awesome. She'd had some public school trauma, so we spent a lot of time talking it over, and she decided to start with one community college art class. Low stakes, creative, aligned with her interests. She loved it. Wonderful. She loved it so much she wanted to start full-time classes. We pulled out our finances and looked things over. I could pick up overtime easily, so I'd start picking up an extra shift a couple of times a month, and she'd drop down to one shift at sushi. This made things a little tight, but she's really starting to blossom. Then the next quarter rolled around, and she decided she needed a car of her own in order to take the classes she wanted. Sharing a car, at its limits, okay. We took the finances out again, and the only way to make that happen was for her to earn $300 more a month to cover the new car note or for me to work 6 days a week, every week. Shipyard welding is hard work. This is when her secret was revealed. She told me with vitriol and rage, "I will never work as hard as you. I will never earn as much as you. You have to take care of me that way, and you need to get used to that now." It was there that I realized I didn't have a wife who wanted a 50-50 partnership with me. She wanted me to spend my lifetime providing her with a lifestyle she herself wasn't willing to work for. 10 years building up to that moment, 7 years of marriage shattered with that secret heart of hers. I filed for divorce 3 months later and never looked back. Story 7. I always suspected because he liked all her stuff on Facebook but barely liked my stuff anymore, but maybe it's just the algorithm, right? I rationalized it. Then during a get-together with our friends, my heart drops when I see her face walk in the door. I hold it together for about 3 hours, but I can't help but see how they light up when they talk to each other. Then I went to the bathroom to retch and get myself back together. I was overreacting, seeing things that weren't there. It was just anxiety coming from my last relationship ending with him cheating. I spent an hour there crying, and he didn't even check on me. I finally go out and don't see either of them. I don't know what compelled me, but I looked for them, and there they were, on top of each other. Neither of them even looked at me. They just stopped and stared at the wall like I wasn't there, said nothing. He denied it till the day I blocked him. He said she was just buzzed and he was being there for her. I wanted to say I needed him to be there for me, but there was no point. There was no rational thought in his words. He was just spewing out whatever he thought would be easiest to end the conversation. It didn't matter what I said because he didn't care, but even his friends admitted it. And now she's his girlfriend, and I've never been able to love since. Story 8. I want to preface this by saying we had an open relationship, so him being with other women was not the issue, but it was relevant to me leaving. I had come home from work one day, and he greeted me and was being very affectionate, so we had an intimate time and ate dinner, and all was well. The next morning, I went to the computer and found a video up on the screen. It was of us being intimate the day before, and the hidden webcam was even still running. We talked previously about filming us together and had done it a few times before, but not in years. I wanted to give him the benefit of the doubt, so I approached him and told him what I found, that I wasn't okay with the secrecy, and if he wanted to film us together, he needed to let me know and involve me in the decision. He agreed, apologized, and we moved on. A little less than a year later, I woke up to him coming to bed. I felt him lifting up the blanket, saw a flash of light, and turned to see he was taking photos of me with his phone when he thought I was asleep. I freaked out and we had a massive argument. I told him, again, that this was a huge boundary crossing, that I was not okay with this kind of thing, and asked why he would do this to me, how he could see me at my most vulnerable and see only an opportunity to take advantage of that. But I didn't get much of an answer beyond, I don't know. I made him delete the photos and he left the bedroom to sleep on the couch, but not before asking if I wanted to break up. I was still struggling with what had just happened and wasn't thinking clearly enough to make a decision like that, so I told him no. I asked him if he did this to other people and he told me no, just me, I guess. We quote-unquote moved on from it. As much as I was able to move on, that is, because I stayed for another year. That year was the darkest time of my life. I was terrified of him doing it again, of cameras being in our bedroom, of him spying on me through my phone camera. I covered myself all the time. I put stickers on my phone camera and on my laptop. I was afraid of sleep, though I forced myself to a few times in the hope it would get rid of the fear. But I wasn't able to truly forgive him, trust him, or move on from my paranoia that the times I had caught him were not the only times he'd done this, and I ended up snooping through his account on the computer. I found videos of other women over the last couple of years, escorts, I'm not sure, taken with a hidden camera, and something in me broke. He had lied to my face when I asked him if he did this to other people. I told him I was leaving that week. He didn't know that I knew about the other videos. It took me a long time to get over the shame of staying as long as I did. I blame myself for not putting my foot down the first time and leaving. Setting a boundary means nothing if there is no consequence. It was as if I had given him the okay to treat me and others that way. Story 9. About 10 years ago, my father received an anonymous letter telling him my mother was having an affair and had been doing so for the last 4 years. We didn't have any proof, but my mother was very secretive and very protective of her iPad. It almost became a sad running joke about the secrets of her iPad. I actually walked by her while she was using it one day and snatched it out of her hands just to mess with her and get a reaction out of her. She jumped up from the couch, grabbed my arm, and took the iPad back, yelling at me not to touch her things. One day, my mother was out, quote-unquote, working overtime, and my sister discovered her iPad was unlocked. She went through it and discovered my mother was meeting her affair partner at that very moment. My father called me, distraught and in tears, asking what he should do. I told him to let me take care of things and for him to just stay home with my sister. I found the restaurant they were at, turned my phone on to record, and went inside. There, I discovered my mother with her affair partner. The look on her face was one of shock as I walked over to their booth, sat down next to her, ordered myself a drink, and asked what was going on. She began to make excuses, but I called her on her lies and told her I knew this had been going on for years and was just waiting for my chance to catch them. The affair partner, who was married with a family themselves, began apologizing, saying they know how awful it was and how sorry they were. I looked at my mother and asked why the affair partner was apologizing when she hadn't apologized yet, and my mother just quietly said, "I'm sorry." I asked more questions to gather more information, all while recording, and after the most awkward 20 minutes of my life, wished them a happy life and left the bar. I called my father on my way to his house, made a pit stop at Home Depot to buy new locks for the door, and went to my father's house and changed the locks. My mother claims she slept in her car that night before asking to go to the house the following day to get some clothes before moving into her brother's house. Over the following 2 years, during all the divorce proceedings, I served as an unofficial mediator, delivering messages or gathering up possessions to drop off to my mother. Their divorce became finalized and a weight came off my shoulders. My days of having to be a go-between and a messenger were over, and I could have a little bit of my sanity back. It was a very difficult thing for me to do, but I was the right person for the job and took care of my family. My father and I have a great relationship, and my relationship with my mother is not strained, but I do feel awkward around them sometimes. My mother's choices have caused her to miss big family moments, such as my wedding, birthdays of their grandkids, christenings, etc. I do not know if my mother ever would have left my father had I not intervened, but I believe that the steps I took that night made everyone's lives better in the long run. I probably need therapy because of the mental anguish and heartache this caused me, but for now, years later, I'm still okay with telling people around me that I'm fine. I wonder who sent the letter, right? Story 10. Well, it was our 5th wedding anniversary and he left his phone downstairs. He says now that he knew and that's why he ran down once he realized that he left it. But he had videos of my closet, my designer bags, and luxury items videotaped by him. And he was offering all of my belongings to whose names looked like they were unusual. That night, he left and $200 was missing, along with a Prada bag I've never seen again. He had a Snapchat story up and was gone for only about an hour and a half because I waited up after nursing our newborn. I was done. Seeing his hand go through my clothes, my stuff, showing a stranger, it was so inappropriate. I was grossed out. Story 11. My ex had been through a lot of bad experiences in her past. Her family was mistreating her and her previous partners were also very awful people. She started struggling with her mental health, but we were working through it. One evening, we went out to an event and there was an inconvenience. Nothing big, just a confluence of events that caused us a setback. Life happens. Over the course of half an hour, she spun it entirely fictitiously into a huge targeted conspiracy meant to ruin her night. Like literally, she was talking about how the patriarchy was trying to silence her voice so she couldn't shine light on their activities, etc., etc., etc. I was there. It had nothing to do with us or her. It was just a random event that's horrible. We were only tangentially affected, but she made herself the center of events. And it made me start thinking about all the stories she told me where everyone around her was evil and she was being targeted. Like, did her dad really tear her door down and yell at her? Did her ex really steal all her money and move her out? Maybe, maybe not. I'd watch her spin reality into a much worse fake story that she totally believed. I couldn't trust her anymore. Story 12. She worked at one of the stores I had merchandised for years. My relationship ended, so a few months later, I approached this girl and gave her my number. She texted enthusiastically, but said she had just gotten out of a relationship and wouldn't want to rush into anything. So I was like, hey, me too. We got along really well and hung out every day for like 9 months. Then, over the phone one night when I was on vacation, she teased me when she heard me say to my mom that I was talking to a friend. She's like, a friend, eh? I said, let's talk about that when I get home. It has been 9 months, so I'm like, okay, it's safe to say we're together now. She got quiet and stopped texting me. I was so confused, no explanation. So I made a Facebook account and looked her up. She never broke up with her boyfriend. Essentially, she cheated on both of us for 9 months. That was fun. I messaged the guy and told him to call me. When I told him, the first thing he said was, it's not the first time she's done this. Then he said, she told me you guys met up once a couple months ago. I was like, no, we've met up nearly every day, sometimes twice a day for the past 9 months. They're still together and just had a kid. Yikes. Kids always say failing relationships, no? Just like marriage, I guess? I don't know. Story 13. The red flags I ignored eventually came to light the day I decided to leave my ex after getting mistreated profusely the previous night. I went through the house and gathered my most important items, and during that search, I found a box that wasn't there when we moved into the house 6 months prior. I looked inside, and to my horror, I found my best friend's clothes. I also found his coworker, who I was told was just his coworker, nothing more, their clothes and my missing clothes. My ex had said those clothes must have disappeared only for me to figure out those two women were wearing my clothes when their clothes got dirty during their intimate time. My best friend's clothes were very easy to identify because I've done her laundry for months when she had no washing machine and dryer until she got her own. My ex never did her laundry or was around it to snag any one of them, so I know where they came from easily. Her fake attitude towards me at random times explained why she had one with me when I did nothing wrong. She was angry I was home, so she couldn't get her fix in with my ex. His coworker, Kiana, had her name custom printed on her luxury clothes. I decided then and there that I couldn't even trust my friends when they knew well that I was getting mistreated and they were still having a good time with my ex. I had no regrets leaving after that. I found my now husband, who treats me so well, and we have a beautiful son together. I don't even look back at my past anymore. I left each and every one of my friends behind, and I'm happy being by myself with my little family. Alright, if you're learning a thing or two from this video, please don't forget to hit that subscribe and like button for more videos just like this. Story 14. Found out he'd been going to girl workers during our entire relationship. I got a weird feeling one day and looked at his computer. His email opened, quite a can of worms. I also found loads of videos saved onto his computer. In 6.5 years, I've never snooped before as it's not something I really believe in. Now, here's where it gets interesting. I called my mom and a friend over because my world just imploded and I needed people around. They practically teleported to my side. LOL. Dude comes home, says, "It's not what he looks like," etc., but shows zero remorse. He's also smirking arrogantly, according to my mom and friend. In hindsight, it was useful to have other people present to notice these things. I asked to see his phone and he says he left it in the car. I'm like, cool, go get it, please. I then calmly follow him to his car and he looks surprised. He must have realized that I wasn't buying anything he was saying. He also didn't get an opportunity to delete anything because I was right there. Ultimately, I didn't want to help him work through his bad habits because there were clearly zero cares given about what I was going through. It became abundantly clear quite quickly that I would have to completely dislike myself to stay with this person. I did stick around long enough to convince him to provide his bank statements to me. I was mostly curious as to how often Buddy was availing himself of the services of those workers. I'd retained a lawyer because we lived together long enough to be as good as married where I'm from. The bank statements were the key that unlocked the existence of multiple investment accounts. It turned out he was hoarding wealth, increasing his net worth by almost $1 million during our cohabitation. I was buying my own groceries and paying for repairs to the home without being on title. Of course, stupid, I know. In retrospect, I had very low self-esteem when we started dating and through much of the relationship, but I gradually built it up as I built my career. I walked away with a dog and a hefty settlement. My settlement was far less than I was entitled to, but given how surprised I was as to the giant hoard of riches, I don't really give a care. I also know he didn't disclose his self-directed investments, Wealthsimple, etc., but I don't care. I went no contact after about a month of pointless arguing, and I'm just happy it's over. Story 15. Her dad never really passed. To be fair, it was a garbage relationship and she was pretty mistreating. She would constantly lie and gaslight me. It's weird. I knew all this, but would just brush it aside and make excuses. This one was the final lie that made me realize I needed to run out of there. So early in our relationship, she told me her dad was quite sick. I supported her through it, but it seemed he was getting worse and worse. She said he had brain cancer, and after a couple of months, he passed away. Having never lost a parent, I was horrified for her and did everything to be there for her. After the funeral, which she refused to let me go to, she came back to my place in full funeral gear with a veil and gloves and mascara running down her eyes. I comforted her while she talked about the shock of what happened. Over the next few months, we grew very close as I helped her work through the grief. A year and a bit later, the relationship is horrendously bad. She's cheated on me, gaslit me, and isolated me from my family. I was living in a trance where I kinda just accepted this as my reality. Every time we'd have a break, she would plead her case and I'd take her back. I was sitting in a random uni lecture when I saw I got a Facebook message request. I click on it and my heart drops as I see it's from her dad. He messaged me saying, "What are you doing with my daughter?" I stalked the profile, at first thinking it's fake, but then realized it's real. I assume it must be someone who hacked into her dad's Facebook. After all, he's gone. She went to the funeral. As I start piecing things together, I begin to realize maybe he never passed. I leave the class and call her saying, "Hey, your dad just messaged me on Facebook. What's going on?" And she basically admitted he never passed. She made the whole thing up for whatever reason. I felt the light finally go on and I realized I needed to be a million miles away from this girl. There's no excuse she could make that would in any way justify what she did. I broke up with her for the final time right after. I've recovered now and come to terms with the awfulness of that relationship, thankfully. Now, whenever I'm hanging with friends and someone mentions a crazy ex story, I can feel all their heads turn to me, lol. Story 16. This wasn't the exact moment I left, but it was the moment I emotionally checked out and knew the end was near. She didn't have a phone, ID, or anything when I met her. Red flag, I know, but I'm dumb. So I let her share my phone using my Text Now number as her number and let her stay logged in for Facebook. Although I tried to respect her privacy, I clearly could see every notification. Plus, I do have trust issues from phone-related evidence in a previous relationship where I was deceived. I started noticing occasional texts or messages that would be brand new with no previous contact that looked like it was an already established conversation. Like a brand new message from a dude on FB that would start with, "Oh, okay, so do you want me to call you tonight?" I obviously confronted her about it and she would get all defensive and make up nonsensical, elaborate excuses. I didn't want to sound jealous, so I'd eventually just drop it. But as it continued to happen, I pressed her about it, with her assuring me with believable realism that it was nothing but friends. Even after I reminded her that if that's all it was, she could easily leave the messages up rather than respond and delete. She eventually got her own phone, and it happened again. She desperately tried to convince me that one of the numbers was just a friend that gives her rides sometimes and that she'll gladly stop talking to him and it was strictly for an occasional ride, and that she's not even cool with him like that and just used him for rides, which is disturbing already in itself. Mad and not buying any of her lies anymore, I reluctantly and stupidly accepted it and told her to delete his number and that if she ever talked to him again, then we're done. Again, I'm fully aware of how dumb I am. She nonchalantly and agreeably says, "Oh, sure, I don't even care about him. Here, I'll delete it," and showed me. On top of all this, after months of allowing her total access to my phone whenever she wanted, as we fully shared my phone together, and she'd delete anything on my phone she didn't want me having, like female friends, old pictures, etc., she suddenly became super protective of her phone. She'd even specifically have to unlock and open the dialer if I ever needed to use it for whatever reason, or would abruptly clutch it if I were reaching for something near her phone because she'd think that's what I was reaching for. At this point, the red flags and blatantly obvious signs are through the roof, but she was heavily gaslighting the ever-living cow out of me and trying to convince me that I was paranoid for no reason. Well, the next day after she deleted the dude's number, she leaves her phone out while in the shower, so I go on it and immediately see that she unblocked the number. I had completely checked out at that point, but after tons of arguing, extreme gaslighting, and weeks of me just quietly resenting the stuff out of her every waking moment, I did finally leave her and I was with her much hotter friend out of revenge. I eventually met the guy, as her friend I had been with was a mutual friend with him, and he lived in the building next to mine and is literally a middle-aged dude who looks exactly like this Ed Basemaster character. He's also known in my city for being a guy that just drives around desperately looking for women, especially homeless ones, in hopes of being with them. He's totally known for giving them money, rides, and free stuff. He collects SSI, lives in a hoarder apartment, and doesn't work, so he literally will drive around town all morning to try to find them. And I knew several women, including my now ex and her friend, that would use him, and from what I heard, the ones desperate enough would actually be with him. Story 17. I found out he was secretly married and lived a double life. He traveled for work, so I only really saw him on weekends. Our relationship progressed slower than what I am used to, and I was okay with that. He said he and his ex-wife were co-parenting and sleeping in separate rooms until his daughter graduated or went to college, which I was also cool with since that was a few months away. I got suspicious when, after a year of dating, I brought up wanting to meet his daughter, ex-wife, since they were never home when he had me over. I was prepared to meet them every time, and we had been together long enough where I felt weird about not meeting either one of them yet. He said he had told his daughter he met someone and that we would make plans to meet. Of course, every time we made plans, they always fell through, and then 2020 happened. I work in long-term care, and 71 out of 100 of my residents were sick, and we ended up losing about 30 of them in a short span of time. So I was terrified of compromising other people, and that delayed things more. After an argument, I got fed up, found the ex-wife on Facebook, and straight up asked her if they were actually separated. She said no, and that they've been happily married for 11 years, and then she blocked me. Oh, and not only was I the mistress, but after I made a public post about him on Facebook, another acquaintance of mine told me that she was also seeing him. Dude was a straight-up pathological liar and manipulator. I dread the day I run into him somewhere because I'm not ready to go to jail for doing something. Story 18. My daughter's iPhone was a hand-me-down from my wife at the time. So one night, when my then wife took our twins to a sleepover at a friend's house while she went out with her coworkers, I heard the phone buzz and thought I'd plug it in so it's charged when my daughter comes home tomorrow. Turns out there was a screenshot of a text with hearts when the face lit up after I plugged it in. My kid was a child. They used drawing apps on the iPhone, so we let them use an older one, and I thought I should be a dad and check to make sure it's nothing weird. My then wife had confessed and text screenshots in detail to her lover all kinds of things via her iPhone. It was synced in real time with my daughter's phone I had in my hand. She was secretly confiding and sleeping with a mutual friend over an hour away. She brought the kids to her friend's place to look after them so she could drive to a different city that night and met up with him. Everything from, I can't stand to be in the same room with him. When I say I love you, I actually mean it. We need to figure out a way to time it so our friends don't disown us. I told him I was extra busy, but I took a second job so I could save up enough to move out. That woman stayed over on the couch on New Year's and she kept saying in texts how she wished she could sneak down and do him. Not only that, but apparently she had secretly messaged all of our friends, don't bring it up with me because he's a private person, but we're going through a mutual divorce. No, we weren't. She was manipulating our friends so she could pre-plan some maneuver so she didn't look like the monster when it all went up. Everyone but me knew and was lied to and was twisted to the point where I could trust no one anymore. This was the wife that I had spent almost a decade with doing everything together. She was bipolar, narcissistic, ADHD, and obsessive to something new each month that I constantly stuck with and wrote it out so we could be happy together and raise our kids. She didn't care about what it would do to anyone. The heartless, selfish, self-absorbed woman in that instant ruined our family. There would be no more Christmas together, opening presents by the tree. I would miss out on half of their childhood. I would suffer in an empty house, terrified at my own shadow, paranoid, wondering if I could ever trust anyone again. When I started going through the phone, I found out all the people helping her sneak him behind my back. I later found out she had hidden cameras in the house to try to catch me doing something wrong so she could shift the blame to me as a cause for her pre-planned divorce. Well, when I confronted her, she broke down, begging me to forgive her. I stayed stoic, emotionless, until I was able to get a post-nuptial agreement in place for us to sign. I couldn't sleep for 5 days. I locked my room and wouldn't let her in. I decided that I could still give my kids a loving father and stick it out and just give them a decent childhood by holding it together and seeing if she really was remorseful. On our anniversary, she hired someone to write a song about us, and in the song, she asked me for a second chance. She blamed everything on her disorders and impulsiveness, why she spent time with someone else. I was down, I couldn't have her touch me without flinching. About a year went on before I could start to see she was making an effort and thought I might be really able to move on and give her a chance, at least for the kids' sake. Then she did it again, different guy. Except this time we were at a week-long gaming event. She volunteered to stay for another week. I went home and watched the kids. Apparently everyone there kind of knew she was flirting with him and never said a word. How humiliating, right? Back home, the water heater broke. I'm struggling, working 12-hour workdays with 2 kids to care for in freezing cold showers, counting the days for her to come home, losing my mind, having not found out anything about the other guy yet. She was supposed to come home Sunday, decides to stay another day longer. Our family was suffering at home and could really use her support, but no, another day. And then came home at 10 p.m. the next day, no explanation. Well, a few weeks later, she announces she wants a divorce and is moving out, that things weren't working out. After I finally was coming out of my emotional challenges and starting to see a chance at trusting her again. She moves out a week later, not even a whole month passes. On my birthday weekend, she was supposed to watch the kids. We executed the post-nup agreement so I keep the house and we both have a 50-50 split of the kids this time. She decides to bail, so I spend my birthday at the museum with my kids, which is fine. I love them so much. Turns out she's in some other state on my birthday being with a new guy and decides to make it Facebook official when she gets back the day after my birthday. Just goes to show how deeply sick narcissists can be. It's been a year. I'm doing okay. I try not to think of it much because it triggers panic episodes and I don't like that feeling. Could have been worse, I guess. Story 19. Currently going through it. Found out he had gambled everything we'd ever had in the past 11 years, including the $70,000 inheritance I got from my mom when she passed. He always had complete control of the bank, initially because he was the breadwinner, then eventually because he controlled it to be that way so he could gamble. So after I'd spent money doing up the house, buying new clothes for the family, furniture for the kids' bedrooms, and doing driving lessons, all of a sudden, he tells me that there is nothing left. Zero. I have a mental breakdown thinking I've blown through $70K and ruined the plans I had for the future for the kids. I feel absolutely crazy because I had a pre-written plan, and as far as my calculations, I shouldn't even be anywhere near zero by like tens of thousands. I go into the deepest challenges of my life, lose a whole bunch of weight, lose myself, have to go back on benefits, including my husband because he's unemployed at this time due to mental health stuff. So now we're back to living under the breadline. My husband, all this time, is the doting, loving man I need, telling me not to be so hard on myself, that I'm not the first to spend an inheritance too fast and I won't be the last. All the while, I'm grieving the passing of my mom, who was my absolute world, and also spiraling into constant thoughts of how I'm a bad mom and embarrassment, how my mom would be utterly ashamed of me for being so irresponsible with the money. Then his phone broke and he needed to log into the banking app on my phone, which he's never done. He's never outright said I can't have the login, but it's also been a weird, touchy subject that's been skirted around in the past. A little voice in my head told me to look at the bank statements, and he'd gambled everything. He was playing to the point where he was borrowing money from friends, family, people we hadn't seen in years, messaging people on Facebook, selling stuff we owned. We were struggling for money to the point where bills were getting skipped. I was skipping meals because we just didn't have the food in. Couldn't afford clothes, couldn't even afford to take the kids on the bus for a fun day out somewhere, nothing. I've never felt so stupid. I've been working through it in therapy because I'm struggling with the shame of being fooled to that extent, amongst other things. But the feeling of being fooled for that long, like, how could I not know? How could I have not seen? Why wasn't my common sense ever presented? There's 11 years worth of lies and entanglement to the story, and this little snippet does it no justice. But yeah, I found out in April, moved him out 3 days later, and me and the kids have been thriving ever since. I'm working on my art business. I take the kids somewhere fun every weekend. The cupboards are always fully stocked. Mentally and emotionally, I'm absolutely devastated, but I just want my kids to have everything they deserve. Story 20. I'm late to this party, but here's my story. Long ago, I was a single dad who picked up and dropped off my kids at the elementary school. Usually, there was a lot of flirting with the moms going on there, but one in particular made it clear she was into more. She was fresh out of the army and had just returned from serving in Iraq. That helps tell you when this was. She was a single mother with 3 girls. Her parents had stepped up and helped out with the kids, etc. About 3 months in, something really wasn't adding up. Like, she would introduce me to certain people as her boyfriend, but to others as a friend. It all came to a head when she was going to spend a weekend in the city to visit a friend who had left from Iraq. No big deal. This was around Myspace days, and to be honest, she and I weren't Myspace friends. Didn't matter. I was sleeping with her daily. While she was away, I decided to send her a friend request on Myspace, so I looked her up. Engaged to a dude currently serving in Iraq. The latest post was about coming to the city to spend time with his fiancée and a pic of the two of them. I confronted her when she got back, and her defense was, I'm just really heating up and the intimacy is really good with you, so why does it matter? We're never going to ever do more than this. She was deaf to my argument that perhaps it might matter to him. She seriously wanted to keep sleeping together, not tell him, and not get attached to each other. I couldn't do that, mostly because I'd hate to be that guy having it happen to me. I broke it off with her that day. I didn't go out of my way to tell the guy because he was active in the army and all. I figured it was best to leave him be. I kept an eye on their MySpace pages out of curiosity, and in the end, he didn't make it out of Iraq after all. Never saw her again, though. Well, if you like these stories and any one of them got to you, here's more for you. YouTube thinks you're going to love this. I'll catch you in that video, and thanks for hanging with me on this one.